but now let's get into the memory part. Okay, so we start with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if you can remember these four guys, I think you can remember these four guys. Right? It's just, you get exposed to them a lot. Does anybody, I kind of knew Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John from a young age. Does anybody have trouble with the order of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? You can raise your hand. No, we already know that. So we can just skip that. We don't need any more work. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's fine. Okay. So we're there. Now, I want you to imagine that you are here. You came to church one morning, and you came expecting to hear the gospel. You came expecting to learn Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And what you got instead was Acts. Is this going to stick in your memory? This is a good vision, right? You say you can't memorize, but you're not going to forget this. Acts. All right? It sounds like Acts. It's a pun. All right, Acts. So I'll just set this here so we can remember. All right, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. We good so far? Now, if you came here for Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you received Acts, what would you do? So, somebody dare to shout out. What would you do next?
Tell the Romans.
You tell the Romans. I was going to say you might leave and start Roman. But yeah, see, let's laugh. Yeah, tell the Romans. Maybe you might roam all the way to ancient Rome. Just get. So maybe you start roaming around, these backwoods here. You roam around you're roaming with the Romans. Can you remember Roman? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Roman. And then imagine, close your eyes for a second. Imagine Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, and then Roman, and you roam, and you come upon two pillars. Two Roman Corinthian pillars. You can open your eyes. You don't see them at the same time. You see the first pillar, and then you see another pillar. There's a first Corinthian and a second Corinthian. All right, but there's two pillars. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Roman, 1 Corinthian, 2 Corinthian. Are you there? Are you imagining a clearing with two pillars? You can remember that. All right, now, between the two pillars, you just have to remember Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. Now, what could we possibly use to remember Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians? General Electric Power Company. I have heard that mnemonic before. Can you remember GEPC? Say what?
PC, Pepsi Cola.
Pepsi Cola. So you just need GEPC. You got General Electric and you got Pepsi Cola. I like to use George eating popcorn. Now you know why we had George eating popcorn and Gary eating popcorn. It seemed silly at the time, but it's memorable.
That's where George comes in?
So yeah, you say what?
George comes in?
That's where George comes in. Yeah, he had to eat popcorn at the beginning, so you have a vision of him eating popcorn. GEPC. A General Electric Power Company is a good one too, if you can remember that. I think they stopped being a power company before I was born, but if it works for you, it works. Whatever it takes to remember GEPC, and then plug that into Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Now, sometimes it can be hard to get ornaments without a Christmas tree. And so it would be helpful if you knew, Galatians, that's the one that's all about grace. That's where we get the fruits of the Holy Spirit, and then, that's right, fruits of the Holy Spirit. Ephesians has the armor of God, put on the whole armor of God. Philippians, that's the one with the Christ hymn, though he had all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, he made himself nothing. And then Colossians, which is about the image of the invisible. But if you don't remember all those things, you haven't studied all those books, I also like to use geography. Right? So Galatia is modern-day Turkey. It's the whole continent, the whole subcontinent of modern-day Turkey. Ephesus is the city in Turkey. It's modern-day Kuchadasi. It's a beautiful city. I've been there. It's incredible. It's on the port. It's just a major city of the ancient world. Colossae, also a beautiful city. They have really great springs there, hot springs and cold springs. So it's a good place for swimming. And then you got Philippi up there closer to Greece. So, GEPC, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, just kind of giving you some context to remember GEPC. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Roman, Corinthian, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Now let's go back to your memory palace. Okay? You're walking around, and you see George eating popcorn. And you're like, well, what's he paying attention to? What's he looking at that's so fascinating? Will he give me some of the popcorn? You've got all these questions, right? Emotion helps. And you see some Longhorns cheerleaders. In fact, you see 4T Longhorns cheerleaders. And the Longhorns cheerleaders are going to be chanting the 4T cheer. What's the 4T cheer? Anybody have a guess?
Texas. It's supposed to be Texas.
Close. How about Fess? Tim tight. So the 4T cheer, Fess, Tim tight. They're calling it. They've got one of those megaphones. So you call Fess, Tim tight.
That's 5
That's
T's.
5.
That's 5 T's. So there are 5 T cheerleaders. You'll remember the mistake. It works. Fess, Tim tight is what you call. So even if you aren't sure what the C stands for in company, maybe, C, is that Corinthian? Is that Colossian? Well, the cheerleader calling. Fess, Tim tight. Will you cheer it with me for a second and feel ridiculous and embarrassed and then remember that you felt that way? Let's do it together. Fess, Tim tight. All right, that's the T's. All right. Sorry.
They're alphabetical.
They are alphabetical, so you can remember the order. That's great. Thank you for So E comes before I, and then you got Titus at the end. 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. Come on, Tiffany, what were you saying?
The H comes before the I. That's how you do alphabetical order.
The H, not the E before the I. Yeah, that's A, B, C.
Teacher.
All right, so what are the cheerleaders cheering for? There's George eating popcorn. There's cheerleaders. They're cheering, that's Tim tight. While I was Roman and I saw these Corinthians and Corinthians. And imagine that after you see the cheerleaders, you come back around from the Glen, and in front of the baseball field, someone has erected a wrestling ring. And in this corner, there's this guy. Anybody know who this guy is, sports fans?
LeBron James.
That's LeBron James. Or, for me, since I'm not on a first-name basis with him, Mr. James. All right? Now, you can remember another James if you want. You can remember James Taylor or Rip James. Okay, but whatever James works for you. So James is going to wrestle this fella. And you don't recognize him, but he's a big, sweaty Greek man. And luckily he's wearing a name tag. It's Philemon. All right, so it's that's Tim tight. We're excited. Philemon versus James. Who's going to win? Philemon. Why does Philemon win?
He's before James.
Because he bruised James. Poor James. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Roman, Corinthian, GEPC, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Thessalonians, Timothy, Titus, Philemon. He bruised James. And what does James do? When you get a bruise, you know, you want to go home and you want to put on some PJs. So here's, PJs are a pretty big deal in our house. We put on PJs every night. So it's plural, so we need at least 2 P's, but then the J's has an X right next to it, so we need 4 J's. Peter, Peter, John, 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 Jude is the rhythm I like to remember it. It's Peter, Peter, John, 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 Jude, but I kind of like to do, you know, you can imagine like a Peter, Peter, and then you can imagine a John, John, and then maybe there's a John, Jude. Together, they're the PJs, right? So if you remember after Philemon, Hebrews, James, that there were some PJs, well then we're tracking, and then you just gotta know the PJs. You just gotta know Peter, Peter, John, 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 Jude. And it's like, you know, it's like 4 syllables that are different from each other. And if it helps you remember, for the glory of Christ, for the sake of the cross, as a servant to you, I scoured the internet and I actually found a picture of basketball superstar LeBron James in PJs. And so if that can help you remember Philemon, Hebrews, James, Peter, Peter, John, 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 Jude, then that will be worth it to me. That is enough. And after that, you just need to remember that Revelation is the last book of the Bible. I can't really help you with that. It's Revelation. It's the last book of the Bible. If you remember Genesis to Revelation, you got it.